Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roberto Daniele. I'm a senior programmer at StartSpace, and I'm here to welcome you at our very first episode of our Rethinking Entrepreneurship series. This is a series that is aimed at challenging some of the stereotypes about entrepreneurship and also welcoming new voices into the room. So our first talk for this series is Rethinking Entrepreneurship, a focus on neurodiversity. Before we start, I would like to do an acknowledgement of country on behalf of the State Library of Victoria. So State Library of Victoria acknowledges the traditional lands of all the Victorian Aboriginal clans and their cultural practices and knowledge systems. We recognise that the State Collection holds traditional cultural knowledge belonging to Indigenous communities in Victoria and around the country. We support communities to protect the integrity of this information gathered from their ancestors in the colonial period. We pay our respect to the elders, past and present, who have handed down these systems of practice to each new generation for millennia. And with that said, welcome to StartSpace. Let me say a couple of words about StartSpace. StartSpace is powered by the State Library of Victoria. So we're in the main building of the State Library in Victoria. And we are a free business support service specifically for new and early stage business founders and startups. A free membership, and I stress it's free. We offer events and workshops. We offer a fantastic community of founders, and we access to a beautiful co-working space. You can see some of the focus in the background. Essentially, you have to be a Victorian resident, you have to be over 18, have a very early stage business idea, and provided that business idea is legal, then you're in. You have a free working space and a very rich program of events. But now to a session, and it is my absolute real pleasure and honor to introduce you to Sharon Zivkovic, who is going to be hosting this session. She will then introduce the speakers. So Dr. Sharon Story is an autistic scholar practitioner. She is the founder and CEO of the social enterprise Community Capacity Builders, which delivers active citizenships and systems social entrepreneurship programs. She's also the co-founder and Chief Innovation Officer of the social enterprise Wicked Labs, which has developed a software tool underpinned by complexity science to assist communities to address complex wicked problems. Wicked Lab also delivers a complex systems leadership program and a program of systemic innovation labs. She's currently studying a Master of Autism at the University of Wollongong, and Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong, this is degree number 7 or something like that, along those lines, to inform a range of artistic social entrepreneurship programs that Community Capacity Builders is developing. Sharon is also an active researcher. She is a visiting fellow in the social entrepreneurship at Northumbria University in the UK, a member of Emerald Publishing Impact Advisory Board, and is recognized as the leading theorist in the map of complexity sciences of applied complexity. And may I add, I've had the pleasure to know Sharon and work with her for the last 3 years, and whatever she touches, whatever she does is incredible. So pay attention. And now over to you, Sharon, to introduce our speakers and to kick this first event off.
Thank you, Roberto. It's such a pleasure to have this opportunity to moderate this topic, and thank you for being. I think this is the first Australian event that focuses on autistic social entrepreneurship. So I'm just really excited. Before we start, though, I just want to, I'm going to be taking our guest speakers through some questions. And if you think of any questions yourself as we go through these first few questions with the speakers, please write your comments on your questions in the chat, and we'll try our best to get to those as well. Before I introduce our speakers, I just want to unpack a bit the topic for this session, which is neurodiversity and entrepreneurship. Neurodiversity, all of us are neurodiverse. So neurodiversity is just about people's minds operating differently. So that is what neurodiversity is. But some of us are considered to be neurodivergent. And that is really our minds operating in a bit different way than what is considered societal norm. norm is a bit of a hard word to swallow too, but we operate a bit differently than what society sees as the normal way of minds operating. And autism is just one form of that. And the speakers on this session are actually all autistic social entrepreneurs. So I just want to touch on a bit about autism. Autism is hard to define. I've recently put in my submission for the South Australian Autism Strategy, and a bit of a plug, the submissions for and answering the questions to provide insights for the South Australian Autism Strategy. They close on Monday, but I've just recently finished mine, and I noticed that within that document they had 6 definitions of autism. So I'm not going to try to give you a definition that everyone's comfortable with for autism, but what I will say is that autistic people have a few characteristics, and some of them relate to social communication interactions, so some challenges in those areas. And also the other second main focus area is around restricted and repetitive behaviours. And what makes us even more diverse is a lot of us have co-occurring conditions. So myself personally, I have ADHD and autism, and 60 to 70% of people who are autistic also have ADHD. So that makes us a really diverse crowd. And the saying goes, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So while we're presenting tonight, I don't want people to think that you know what autism is because you've heard from 3 autistic people. We're very diverse. It is considered a spectrum, but I look very forward to hearing the insights from our guest speakers tonight. So I'll introduce our guest speakers, and I have to admit that they're friends and colleagues. So we have Kate McGarry, from the founder of A Scarebags. I'm not going to go into Kate's journey at all because she's going to be sharing that as we work through some of the questions, but both Kate's and Caracas Gold, who's our other speaker tonight, who's the founder of Just Gold, they'll be sharing some of their journey as we work through the questions tonight, but also their bios are available on the Eventbrite page. So who's going to go first? I reckon I'm going to pick on Kate. So Kate, tell us a little bit about your journey with A Scarebags.
I was going to actually ask you not to do that tonight, but that's okay. So my journey, I need to explain A Scarebags. I need to actually read something that I've put together so that I can stay focused predominantly on my social enterprise that is very near and dear to me. But a bit about it is the history. So since the beginning of the century, the number of children placed in out-of-home care across Australia has risen by over 300% in just 20 years, from 16,000 to an average of 48,000 children currently in state care per year. Last century, it was 500,000 children, and I am one of those children who were placed in and neglected in state institutionalised care. We are now known as the Forgotten Australians, and as a marginalised group, we're often referred to as care leavers, and history is on auto-repeat. It's frequently reported, and I can attest to the fact that personal belongings are put in plastic garbage bags as these children and young people are frequently bounced between services, ultimately resulting in them living in undignified quality of life and prone to becoming homeless, suffering from mental health issues, and in contact with the justice system. Their traumatic upbringing and disadvantage can have a lifelong impact on self-worth, identity, health, and career potential due to the fact that care leavers have minimal options, limited resources, fragmented social and family supports, and few or no safety nets to fall back on should they experience hardship or difficulty throughout their lives. And to add to that, for me personally, I've recently found out that I'm also an autistic woman. So all my life I've been autistic. So I was a young person placed in this environment with a disability that wasn't recognised. But A Scarebags, A stands for Australian Care Experienced. So A Scarebags is a pre-startup social enterprise ready for idea phase funding. Our social purpose and vision is for a lifetime of support, connection and inclusion for every person who grows up impacted by the out-of-home care system across Australia. We plan to do this by selling ethically made versatile gear bags to the sports and recreation industry. while using our profits to provide quality gear bags and resources which connects young people impacted by out-of-home care with local support services across the country. How did I go?
You went brilliantly. Like that had lived experience written all over it, Kate.
I could have gone down rabbit holes, so I thought I'll just write it up and read it off.
Well done. Now, Caracas, Just Gold digital agency. Can you tell us a bit about your story and what Just Gold does?
Absolutely. Firstly, I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I'm coming to you from Ghana land today. I'm in Adelaide. And I also want to acknowledge that it's really difficult to focus as an autistic person with ADHD. So, Kate, I'm with you on this journey. And a little bit about Just Gold. Just Gold is pretty much myself the last 5 years, although I have a team, but Just Gold is like a little autistic child that's trying to be different and succeed in the world of business. In social enterprise terms, Just Gold is an accredited social enterprise. It's the first consulting and creative agency in Australia that's an accredited social enterprise, and it's also a B Corp. So what we do is we provide services across the full spectrum of, pun intended, of communications and strategy, as well as creative services. We do so for tier 1 clients and the government, and from our profits, we deliver the same services to the social sector at a fraction of the cost. So pro bono or low bono. We do that with diverse teams, with teams that are consisted by highly skilled professionals in the social sector. And if, again, I was to use social sector terms, our purpose is to amplify the voices of the sector by removing the barrier to marketing that many social enterprises have. In addition to this complex business model, when we have extra funds from our revenue, we also initiate projects, social change projects, mostly communication projects that are aligned with our 4 pillars that are LGBTQ empowerment, women's empowerment, neurodiversity, and culturally and linguistically diverse people. I hope I've captured that okay, Sharon?
Yes, you did brilliantly. I think it's just both of your enterprises are just so exciting, and it just highlights the diversity as well, which is just, yeah, we all love diversity. So yeah, just brilliant. And I can see the opportunities with regards to us coming together and doing work together, which is exciting. My second question for you both, and I'm going to go for you again, Kate, so get ready for this. So being autistic, how has that impacted on your journey of creating a scareback? What do you think have been the strengths and what have been the challenges from being an autistic person that's starting up a social enterprise?
Well, that's a loaded question. Being autistic all your life and not knowing it, and starting or attempting to start a social enterprise before you know it, it becomes a very interesting question, because I was professionally identified autistic with CPTSD in the middle of last year. So that, and at the beginning of the year, I was recognised formally as a forgotten Australian. And so that was a lot to process. And I'd already been working and trying to develop something for care leavers and in that space of social enterprise, basically since the beginning of the pandemic, when they handed us a toilet roll and said, go home. So I just started jumping on. And I have an entrepreneurial background in training and development. So I was a sole trader for 20 years, 15 years in training and development, learning and development. So that kind of got thrown to the wayside, career development, all that. It was sort of like, right, so we're going to pivot the career. And then I was having challenges anyway that I thought was my upbringing and being a bit different, and being in institutionalized care. There's no family environment. It's not a great way to grow up. But just to jump on the strengths, because that's where my notes are. And I had a chat to one of my mentors today, and I've gone, you better give me some strengths. She goes, mate, you got heaps. And I'm like, yeah, but, you know. And so this outside of the box thinking, and I've always been that person. What can we do with what we've got? Success was doing the best you can where you are with what you have. And so you've got to think outside the box. And I always found going into organisations as a trainer, as a contractor, I was always the outsider anyway. So I had to think outside the box because you were never given resources. But coming back to my autistic, well, I'd like to call it characteristic strengths, because it's who I am, and I can't pull apart my autistic being. Do you know what I mean? So I know that I'm very much a systems and process thinker, and that's why I'm a really good technical trainer. I've got a very unique perspective on things, and I have a lot of lived experience around stuff. I'm a problem solver, but I've always had challenges in the past where people are like, oh, you're pointing out a problem. It's like, you've got to point out the problem to find a solution. Like if you've got a leaking pipe, plumbing pipe, you've got to find where the leak is, and that's a problem. So then we go in with solution. But that's how I see it. Extraordinary eye for detail to the point of it being actually a challenge, because I can't just fix that line. Open-minded, my honesty, people sort of say, I'm just honest with people. I go, this is who I am. Usually there's already a judgment. I'm almost 6 foot in heels, and I've a big mad redhead, and people have this idea. They go, oh, you're an extrovert. I'm like, no, I'm actually an introverted extrovert, or extroverted introvert. And then now all that aside, I'm actually autistic, and I'm not a people person, which brings me into some of the challenges, because peopling, as I call it, has been a big challenge for me. That's my job. And when I go home, I'm exhausted, and I like to be alone, and I like things to be in a certain way, in a certain order, and don't put things in the wrong spot, because I'm going to melt down. And people on the outside don't see that, and they don't see that social, talking about social entrepreneurship, there's this expectation of entrepreneurs, you have to be social and you be with other social entrepreneurs. And I'm like, but they're not my customers or my beneficiaries. And I have to put in a huge amount of energy getting out of the house, let alone traveling to where I have to be before I've even started doing what I've got to do. And that's usually stuff that I hate doing, like small talk and things like that. It's like, what's the purpose of the document? Like, get on with it. So I normally position myself in a crew space so that I'm a helper rather than being social. So the challenges I have is sort of like in those event type spaces where people don't see as an autistic person that when I have sensory overwhelm, my hearing, I can't filter the hearing, the migraines kick in, I lose my vision. People don't see that because I'm standing there like this. I was at an event once where I was all dolled up in this rock and roll, awesome satin and velvet dress at a high tea event, and I was saying to my friend, "I think I'm having a stroke." She's like, "Going what?" And I'm like, "I think I'm having a stroke." And that was my first major panic attack in a big event. And since then, I'm just really reluctant. So I find that really hard when it comes to the social enterprise building out and going to all these events. That's where my biggest challenge is, which brings me to my other challenge is accessibility, which I'm a bit passionate about. But I think as we have this conversation, accessibility is a big part of the conversation here. If the ecosystem is to start supporting us as social entrepreneurs, they need to start understanding the realities that we face showing up as individuals and the expectations they have, and where accessibility is just not taken under consideration. It's like, we support neurodiverse people, neurodivergent people, but we're not actually going to make any changes to make it easier for them to access and join us in things. So there you go.
Fantastic, Kate. And yeah, just so many thoughts. As an older autistic woman, I reckon I can just about say elder autistic woman, I think we have masked a lot. And so people don't see what's happening on the inside, and they don't see what happens when we get home. And so it's really important to have this discussion, because we try to fit in, like we try to fit in with everybody else, and don't want to cause a scene, and don't want to be a burden if we attend. But there's all this stuff that's happening on the inside, and I think it's just so exciting now that we're having these conversations and letting people in on what it's really like to be us. So thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. Caracas, what has been your challenges and your strengths, do you reckon, on this journey as an autistic person?
I'll tell you first what I'm thinking right now, which is a great thanks to Roberto for initiating this discussion, because we get to see as autistic people how we mask now in front of a public audience, and how we were talking half an hour ago when we were ourselves. So that constant struggle of now I have to be perfect so you can understand me, when half an hour ago there was no one here, we were giggling like we were 5-year-old kids, but we were still making sense to each other. So I've been diagnosed autistic with ADHD 5 years ago, and that diagnosis is still kind of making sense. A few months ago when I met with Sharon, and Sharon goes to me, "Oh, what level are you on?" And I said, "Are there levels?" And then I look back at my diagnosis and go, "Oh, yes, there are." That's a really good example of how I understand things when they happen, what is important and what isn't for me. So I only know what's happening inside me. I only have that point of reference. So I don't know how different I am to the everyday person. I don't know what my challenges are till somebody similar to me can explain this to me, because they have my own language. So navigating through life, I'm 47 now, up to 43. I just thought life was the same for everybody. I didn't know I had a difficult, challenging life. I just thought you fall, you get up. You fall, you get up. I didn't know I felt like 8 times more than the everyday, I would say normal, which is a loaded word, person. So it was such a struggle. It was such a struggle. I thought all these simple things in my mind that I was explaining to people, um, people hated me. They just did not want to communicate. I didn't know they were complex to the other person. I didn't know that I see a project this way and this way, and an everyday person would see it this way. So I had no concept of what another brain can think, and none of us does. We can only be in our own brain. So imagine in if we were to have this line of autistic people and non-autistic people. Non-autistic people all think the same way. Autistic people not only think differently than non-autistic people, but they think differently than each other as well. So there's no point of there's no benchmarking. It's just crazy. So there were benefits, of course. I have a really fast processing machine. I can learn languages really well. I have 5 degrees, but they were missing of social cues at the same time. There was disconnection in culture because I'm literal, like Kate mentioned. When I tell you a word, there's no emotion to it. It's just a word. This is a cupboard. This is a belly. I'm not calling you fat. This is a belly. So that can be really difficult in an everyday scenario, because when somebody is being really diplomatic, I cannot understand what they're really trying to say, because we have words. So use your words. And when I'm telling them using my words what I want to say, they take it to heart, because it's like you're really blunt. So that's, I think, the first point of miscommunication between autistics and non-autistics. And when business comes in between, when there's a transaction with $1, if somebody's unhappy, there won't be a transaction. So there you go. You're this business or this service provider that can give an excellent product, but you might not be the smiley person that is good at sales. So that's the positive and the negative, I think, in its most simplified form, without taking too much time. When I built Just Gold, I didn't know I was a social entrepreneur. I didn't know there was a word for that. I didn't know I was fighting the good fight. I thought it was just life. because making a better world meant that I get to live, that I have accessible services in an accessible world. I didn't think I was a superhero. To another person think, oh my God, you're a superhero, you fighting the good fight. We're not. We're just trying to be.
I hate that term. I've been told that. Go, please don't. It puts too much pressure on things.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. It's almost like everybody's trying to make excuses for our difficulties. It's like, no, I'm not a superhero. I struggle all day long. And I'm sure Wonder Woman and Superman do not have those struggles.
Yes,
dude, I'm a Marvel girl. You just dropped DC superheroes. I'm more like Black Widow.
Thank you, Kyriakis. Just such important points, and I think that communicating differently is really important. And there's this concept called the double empathy problem, where it's not all put on the autistic person. Like the fact is, communication is a two-way thing, and people have got to meet us halfway. There's a really good skit, if you Google it on YouTube. If you Google like autism and the two Ronnies, there's this skit of the two Ronnies in a shop, like talking at each other. And I think it is something that we really need people to understand what our communication, how we communicate, and for it to be accepted for what it is.
And also that not everything quirky is autism. So that's another thing, and just because you're having a struggle, you don't have ADHD. So you see people now just trying to wear our diagnosis like a badge of pride, like a badge of honor, which is fine. We're proud of who we are, but it's not fashion. You know what I mean? It's not fashion. And it just, for us, business is double. Life is difficult as it is. Business is more difficult than life. There's another layer. There's a transactional element, the dollar that you've got to give. Like when you walk through the street and you breathe and you're just like, okay, I'm not going to touch that person. I can be more myself. But in business, you have to mask.
Yeah.
You have to mask. You can't hide.
Like this conversation, identifying as autistic social entrepreneurs, huge risk for our careers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Reality, because moving forward, I found it's sort of like, wow, and it's interesting that you're saying about how people perceive you and things. I didn't even know where, people would say to me all the time, your clients or your participants or whoever, they love you. And that's because I always invited them into a learning space, and I put everything into them, and they gave back to me. So it was an exchange of energy. And then I'd have colleagues say, but the other trainers don't like you. And I'd be like, why? But I'm a nice person. And they're like,
how do you know?
The other trainers don't like you. And it's like, I've done nothing wrong to them. I don't understand. And it's like, this is not processing in my head. And then I realised it's because I had no interest in them and I couldn't relate to them. And I just put it down to my upbringing, and I didn't relate to the whole picket fence kind of normal way of life. And then, like some of the potential gaslighting that I've received over the years went straight over my head. And then after my diagnosis, looking back going, are you serious? Like, probably not a bad thing that I didn't know, because the CPTSD kicks in and I get a little bit like, right, mate, I'm going to take you outside. No, but it's more of a case of not realising the abuse from other people when they say things that go over your head, or, Kate will always, say what's on her mind. Or
Kate, do you mind, because you gave a bunch of initials there for your other diagnosis, do you mind just spelling that out, what the autism and
CPTSD is not uncommon for autistic people. I just want to welcome and say hi to the Auslang interpreters that keep popping up. So CPTSD stands for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, and it's very common in care experienced people. because of severe childhood trauma. It usually comes from that space, or war veterans are often diagnosed with CPTSD. It's a little bit different to PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. That's usually a one-off event. So from like a one-off accident that people might have, PTSD from. Complex is ongoing and years of abuse and trauma. So that's kind of, it can actually, they say in diagnosis, it can get a little bit blurry, but they were able to identify pre my going into care what kind of kid I was. There's a lot of questions asked. But then with the CPTSD, sometimes I can get a little bit reactive. If, say, for example, people are aggressive, I kind of, listen, I'm also a competitive trained martial artist at one point. So I kind of go, all right. But that had nothing to do with the fact that I actually was in street fights and wars as a kid. Like, I was literally in the middle of a lot of violence for a long time, and you learn how to fight and you cheat when you fight, whereas the martial arts is a little bit more disciplined. Anyway, there's the rabbit hole. We'll come bring it back.
Yeah, back it up.
But what can happen is sort of like I get a little bit I don't get angry, like I don't have anger issues, but I can feel under threat very quickly.
Yeah, I get selective mutism, so I just stop. My brain just stops. I just stop talking. I go on holidays.
I get Greta Tan.
I get the look, and people think I'm evil because I usually got those.
I call it Greta Thunberg face, because this is the only way for everybody to understand when you're comparing it to a little girl, so that she's not threatening, and like to a 47-year-old male with a beard, because of our unconscious bias. Then people are going, oh, okay, you're not threatening. You are just like struggling. You're having a meltdown, or you're really passionate.
It's funny you say that, because I spent years in the trades industry, Kyriakis, with tradesmen, being the only woman with all tradesmen, and I was in my comfort zone. I loved the boys. Like, I loved the boys. I love the way. And when they came in, I go, you better not, and you better sit down over there, or I'm just going to have to deduct something out of your payroll. Like, it was. I'm gonna put my moderators how women's minds worked. I was just like, I really don't get it. Like, so when you say kind of an intimidating, like, I actually feel safe around the likes of that big, bold, bearded man. I'm like, oh, it's all good in the hood, but.
Can I pull the conversation back to entrepreneurship? I'm gonna pull us back.
Roberto.
Because like, if the three of us were in a room together, we would be in strife. We would be everywhere. If we look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem, we're at an amazing point of time. I mean, like this session's, it's been supported by Roberto, which works for the Victorian government, and they have an autism plan that came out in 2019, which talks about self-determination of autistic people through entrepreneurship. And then we had March last year, we had social enterprise and leading social enterprises and starting social enterprises seen as a way for autistic people to address, the high level of unemployment that autistic people have to encounter. In that Senate Select Committee Inquiry report, it said it was like 3 times that of unemployment for disability. So it's huge. So there's this opportunity, I guess, in the policy space and interest with regards to autistic entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. I'll start with Kyriakis. What do you think? How do you think the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the social entrepreneurial ecosystems could be more supportive of autistic entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship? What do you think the different players, the support people, could do in the entrepreneurship space to make it easier for autistic people to be entrepreneurs?
So, look, it's a wicked question, and it's a wicked problem, and it's a wicked answer. So we don't live in a bubble. So entrepreneurship is not a bubble. Entrepreneurship is part of life. Like I said before, Life, it's difficult, and then entrepreneurship is double difficult. So for autistic people to be able to perform better in entrepreneurship, like the world has to change, society has to change. So there's two layers of education. One layer is, and I'm trying to bullet point it because I know we go down in rabbit holes. One is make the world a better, more, not, I hate the word tolerant, because we don't want to be tolerated, we want to be celebrated. So make the world a place that celebrates diversity, raise better children, predominantly raise better sons, because yeah, not, I'm talking about in general what our system needs to do. And then in terms of when everybody knows what we need to communicate, how we can communicate better, how we can support each other better, then automatically when you move into, let's say, bubble of entrepreneurship, then things are easy by default. In the interim, we need special measures within entrepreneurship, and in that interim we need better programs, like understanding that autism can be a disability that will need special consideration, have more programs in terms of professional development. For example, that understanding of invisible disabilities and visible disabilities. So if my leg is not broken, if you can't see it, I might not be able to get that funding because I have to prove my difficulty. So that invisible disability, that understanding of invisible disabilities in business structures, in business funding, in business development, in professional development for business owners, that needs to be there. For my generation, I said before that I'm 46 to 47, like there was no awareness when we were growing up. And I grew up in Greece as well, which was an even, I don't want to say backwards. It was a different place in Australia, different education systems. My parents did not even know that I could possibly be autistic. They didn't know that what autism is. Today, parents know. See what a difference it makes? If I was born today, I could have been diagnosed 20 years earlier, which means that I would have gone even further in life. So if I can go through life with all those challenges and build a business that's successful, that is exemplary, I can have 5 degrees. Imagine if I had my diagnosis earlier, how much more I could have provided for our world and understanding of our difficulties. And I think that applies to all of us. So understanding diagnosis, making diagnosis more accessible, make it easier for businesses to employ autistic people, provide business support to employ neurodivergent people. There's just so much we can do. But in bullet points, because I don't want to bore you up, the good humans that are listening to us, first look at society, change society, then go in the bubble. In the interim, attack the bubble so you can have a dual effect.
Thank you. So many great points, and I hope we have some policy and decision makers from different organisations in the ecosystem that can take those on board as well. So thank you, Kyriakos. Kate, I know this is a bit of I know you'll have a list for this one.
No, Shazza.
Cool. You go, girl.
In agreement to everything that Kyriakos just said, and I'm of a similar age, I'm just finding accessibility is a real, when it comes to building social enterprise and what's expected of us in order to build enterprise or build a business, whether it be small, medium, where whatever your background is. And I'm sort of thinking from the little fella, like the little person. If I keep opening my mouth, I'm just going to sound wrong. From the person that is getting a leg in, trying to start something, that ideas phase. And what I'm finding is accessibility is a huge issue. So I'm seeing, all right, as a systems person, and I'm scaling and scanning different websites, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, it's neurodiverse. It's like it's a blanketed term, right? It's like this buzzword. And I'm getting a little bit jack of it, like, because it's sort of like I've read through and I don't want to I've got a pause so that I don't mention names. and I read through their policy and their inclusion and all that kind of stuff. Just to reiterate, I was a trainer in business, a business trainer for 15 years. So what I kind of used to teach people to write this stuff. And it says things like, we embrace our neurodiverse members or people and their ability. And I go, who have you spoken to about this? And so I actually worked for a major government department with their Aboriginal cultural awareness trainer and their team, in their L&D team. And one of the things that I learned was sort of like that. There's the whole nothing about us without us, but when it came to cultural awareness, you check in and make sure that you've got that right terminology and that you actually, it's coming from people who understand that cohort. In the example's case, Aboriginal people. So you don't use things like ATSI or Aborigine and things like you check. And I've seen businesses using that terminology and trying to sort of go, yes, we respectfully acknowledge, but you're not actually respectfully acknowledging the language. Comes back to us as a group of people. It's sort of like putting brackets around disability, and it's sort of like we have a disability and we deserve equity. At the end of the day, for us to fit into this neurotypical world and the way that you function things with all the big bright lights and for me, my sensory overload, I just can't manage it anymore. I'm getting too old. I've burnt out so many times over the years to the point where I've had major autistic burnout, and it impacted me mentally and physically to the point where physically I couldn't walk. So because I kept, that masking and kept pushing through those environments. So we've got to stop using neurodiversity or neurodivergency and all this inclusivity as a buzzword, because legislation says you have to. At the end of the day, it's about implementing changes that actually, when you listen, help others, everybody benefits. Things like quiet rooms, you'll get people who are not neurodivergent, they might be introverts, and they love it. They go, yeah, we really needed this quiet space, because that way we can recharge. Having things like, quiet spaces at events. I went to Social Enterprise World Forum last year, and I was part of a small group who designed a quiet room in that space. Now, I loved being at that event, but at the same time I struggled in that event with the crowds and things like that. So, and just there's an event going on in the near future, and I looked into what they were doing, and it said accessibility, and I clicked the button and I opened it up. You know what it said? This venue has wheelchair access. That was it. And I was like, what? What's that about? Like, accessibility is about providing information in advance. It would help me greatly if I had as much information about where the location of this venue was as possible. I helped write an accessibility document for Social Enterprise World Forum last year, where we're using images and bullet points and changing the way that you're displaying information, using more simpler language, which government actually insists on. They have government writing documentation insists on basic language. So especially when it's public publications, the corporate academic world, they've got to stop talking the jargon, and then we get asked not to use our jargon, but we've got to get our heads around your jargon. Yeah. Things like having that accessible person or that invitation, that offer. I think we were talking about it before we started going live or during, but it was something about not having to force us to turn screens on when you're running events. There's stereotypes. So just to back it up, so we've got the accessibility piece, understanding sensory overwhelm and what that means. I've been told I'm arrogant because I've got earplugs in, and I'm trying to focus, I'm trying to work. There's so many noises in that environment, but then I'm arrogant because I've got headphones on and I'm just trying to filter out. And there's a lot more to sensory overwhelm than just wearing headphones. Everybody's different. We've got the social and communication stuff, but there's stereotypes. So being patronised is another thing. It's sort of like, you know, our neurodivergent friends might not understand. If I'm a professional and have been for 20 years in business, I'm just, and you know how you did that scary bearded man thing, Kyriakos?
Mhm.
Patronise Kate, you're going to get a scary redhead on your hands.
But it's exactly the same pattern, so, Kate and Sharon. That it's a racist pattern. It's the way people used to talk to people with accents. They used to talk to us slower, like we had a hearing problem
Are you
or
okay?
a comprehension problem. Like, it's just plain racism. It's nothing more, nothing less. It just applies to different groups of people. I just want to say that it's true that as we get older, our defense mechanisms weaken. It's imagine being in a constant battle. You get tired at some stage. You know, you get wounded once, you have one burnout, it heals. But the second time you're going to go up in that wound,
Keep
it's
breaking the
going to
same
be
spot.
even worse.
Yep.
So it's that broader understanding. And when I do vision and mission work and narratives work with my social enterprise clients, I always say to people, what is the ideal world that your business is not needed? So to get people to understand what their vision is, so a world that accessibility policies are no longer required because everybody knows and everything is built in a way that we can all have equal opportunity. That's a vision.
Mm.
None of this is required. So this is just the interim where you're going to have to continue trying to convince people that we need to have an equal world. So that business understanding it's aligned with the understanding of equality and equity. That quite well, like really well put, Kate, before when you said we need equity. We need that.
Yeah. Like, I guess for bringing it back into the ecosystem, I think of the networks that are out there and how I need to connect in with social capital. Social capital is so important in this particular area. Even, you know, and we learn from others and connect with others. But at the same time, we can get left out really quickly. And if we ask questions that people just assume you know, that cohort of people know, and they're not going to explain things. I've felt at times that people have avoided, like, you can kind of have this tendency to see me from across the room, I think. And I've seen people kind of make eye contact, turn and start heading the other way. It's like, I don't understand why, because I might have too many questions or I might talk too much or something like that. But some of the other things, like, I'm thinking about how within the ecosystem of support, and there's networks and organizations, like there's social enterprises that actually, you know, help people develop social enterprise. I'm thinking about that ecosystem and how they engage with us as neurodivergent learners and things like that. And I'm finding that what my struggle has been over the last couple of years, especially being in an online environment, you know, it's like being put into a breakout room. You've got 10 minutes with a group of strangers and you've got to answer this question and come back with something of value. Well, can you maybe give me a heads up before I come into your event so that I can put thought into that previously? Because I'm either going to ask other people and they're going to talk and I'm not going to get anything out of it, or I need to think about that. You know, like sending session plans in advance when they're running these workshops. You know, keeping those groups small, identify reachable contact people for follow-up questions. As I said, it can't be a lip service anymore. We're here and there is so much work that needs to be done. And I need to jump to the chat and acknowledge these people, one of them being like a sister of mine. And she says that it's not just the physical mobility accessibility, but not so much is in the space for cognitive and sensory accessibility. These are the things that these organisations need to stop just fitting us in like a buzzword and go, oh, you know, we're diverse because, you know, as I said, legislation says you have to be. You need to make a few slight changes, have conversations with us. Don't guess. Don't write things that you think is the right thing. And then the language is really important to a lot of people. Now that can, open up another can of worms when it comes to language. But like when you dismiss our disability, like everybody's equal around here. No, we're not equal. We need some reasonable adjustments that actually benefits the larger cohort so that we can actually be heard. And here, every individual is going to have different needs. Now, I personally am developing predominantly what's going to be an e-commerce business. I have no real need to be in these large group environments. Now, unless I'm on crew, there's no point putting me in me going as a participant and just showing up and having conversation. All it is an absolute drainer, and I don't get what they think we're going to get out of it, like networking, and I could do that online, but everybody's different. Some people love the social side of things, and that's cool too. But
I'm exactly the opposite.
Encourage a buddy. If I know someone there, what was that?
I'm exactly the opposite. If I need to sell or make a business connection, and it's very important, I prefer it to be in real life. Making content, making video is my broadcasting career is my passion, and I love it. But when a conversation is really crucial to my business and very important, my anxiety may hit the roof, and that could only be taken away by me understanding how the other person is with body language, with energy, will coming down, walking out of the room, and that cannot be in Zoom, especially if I had 4 of them in a day. So there is no blanket approach. What we're trying to say is that we need that awareness that I was interviewed for a board position last week. It was really important to me. I know I was the best person for it. I can just say that because that's the way my brain works. I couldn't say no. I got so excited. I couldn't say no. Let's just do this in person. I'm really anxious at the moment. This week is really intense. I went in the Zoom interview and it wasn't great. I know it wasn't great. I know what I felt. I know I blacked out for 2 seconds. You black out for 2 seconds, you come back, you don't know where you are. Doesn't matter how many degrees you have, doesn't matter how much experience, doesn't matter how many millions your business turns over. You've blacked out. And it doesn't happen just once. It happens when your anxiety levels are at such a high point that you become a Microsoft computer and you need a blue screen of death. So it comes back to life. That we need that understanding. People need to understand that this happens. And it's not just 5 people or 2 people or 3 people. That could happen to anyone. And the more and more we're conditioned to use technology, our attention span shrinks. I know my autism is intensified when I have used a lot of technology in the week. I've mapped the pattern. So if it happens to me, it happens to others as well. It is that understanding of what our environment does, how it affects us, and how that constantly changing environment will affect future generations and future transactions. Because all this is not just a social justice discussion, this is a business discussion. How will the future generations, we know that autistic diagnosis numbers are up. We know that because we've got better technology, better science. People go get tested. We know that autistic people, for example, have a different relationship with gender. That's why the trans community is suddenly much bigger. How does that affect business? So everything is interlinked. None of it is a bubble. They're like bubbles within each other. They all affect each other. It's almost like liquid chemical reactions. Sharon, I can see.
Yes, and I was just going to say, with regards to those 2 perspectives, it shows the diversity. There's a question come through whether people can ask questions. Please put questions in the chat.
Yes,
we've got 10 minutes of this discussion. 10 minutes of this discussion left, and then we'll be going to the questions that are in the chat. So please put your questions into the chat for our 2 speakers. We probably won't get to questions about the diagnosis process because we have been asked to stick to like autistic entrepreneurship, that kind of space. So we probably won't have a chance to get to those kinds of questions. What we will do,
I remember. Sorry, I have to get this out, Shaz.
Okay, quickly, because I got one more question I want to ask you before our time's up.
Well, this is why we're in the same subject, this thinking outside the box, and how can the ecosystem, and I think you might actually like this suggestion, make a professional development process for neurodivergent and ASD recognised certification for social enterprise networks. Have it so that they've done a PD. Oh, geez, I think I might know somebody who might be doing that. But like
a tick of approval, a different kind of a certification.
It's like there's cultural awareness science trainings. You do WHS trainings. I mean, at the end of the and WHS, when it comes to workplace health and safety, and client health and safety, or member health and safety, you can't just sort of pigeonhole. They need to have better understanding, especially on the physical side of it, and where we're different. At the end of the day, it physically impacts us, whether you love getting in front of people and there's a bit of anxiety. And sensory overwhelm, and the energy that it takes to preparing, whether it be, Zoom is too much for you, or going into, like, I did spend 15 years in front running around dozens and dozens of people a day. So I'm not that averse to it, but it's the process of getting there and what's expected of me. And then I've got to do more and more. And as an entrepreneur, you really have to be a generalist.
Yeah.
But a PD, a professional development certification, and I think I know someone who's writing one.
20 seconds. The first module will be, do not tell people you do not look autistic.
Second module will be,
not a nice thing to say.
Kyriakis in the same room discussing the issue.
Do not tell people you do not look autistic. It's the most offensive thing you could ever say.
It is so important. I've got one last question for you both. Before we hand over and start, before we start going through any questions that are here with us. If you were asked to give one bit of advice to an autistic person thinking about starting an enterprise, what would it be? Kyriakis, I'm going to pass this one to you first. What bit of advice would you give someone?
Can you say the question again?
If you were to give one bit of advice to an autistic person that was thinking about starting an enterprise, what would it be?
Find your internal interpreter, or find an interpreter to partner with. Find somebody that understands you and can pass your vision, because your vision is correct. It's the way it's communicated that may not be understood. That's my biggest advice. And I take the assumption that that autistic person will have a diagnosis. If that person doesn't have a diagnosis, my first advice would be, get your diagnosis. Your life will change, and wait for the diagnosis to mature, to understand it, to unmask and remask, because that is a big trauma. That is a really big trauma when you just pull the Hansaplast and you let the wound re-heal all over again. So that's for people with no diagnosis. And for people with diagnosis that have gone through these, find a person that can interpret your vision and partner with them.
Good one.
Wonderful.
Kate,
what would you say?
I just wanted to acknowledge the chat again. The mentoring program for autistic social entrepreneurs, I think that's what needs to be funded. We need to, Kate, deliver. I don't know about delivering the PD. I don't think I could focus. I don't know. The mentoring program would be awesome. Like people where they understood us and would understand our vision, and I think that's really important. And it kind of adds on to, it enforces what Kyriakis just said. I think it's really important. And patient mentors as well. Obviously, I don't like doing advice, because my whole thing's like, I don't do life coaches either. But I got this quote that I thought was really cool. I'll just open it up. It's not as probably profound as Kyriakis. And just FYI, apparently somebody thinks you should be running the country.
I'd be glad to.
And Nicholas, I don't think I will ever forget the way you could pull off a vest, a tie, and a pair of runners. So I do. you were socially overwhelmed and said, I'm having a... Yeah, I was a lot. Anyway, I stopped reading the chats and read my notes. Actress Tracy Alice Ross from Mixedish. I am learning every day to allow the space between where I am and where I want to be to inspire me and not terrify me. And I really loved that. You know, I thought that I thought it's not me giving someone advice. It's advice that I thought was profound as a woman, because I'm the woman with autism and trying to work it all out and try to build a life moving forward in an enterprise where I do good, and learning about myself as well is a lot. But I would advise any women with autism who are wanting to enter the space to check out. There's a book called Spectrum Women by Barb Cook and Associates, and absolute mastery. I love Barb so much. I'm a Barb fangirl. It just, you know, if Barb ever watches this. But it was just, to me, I just felt so empowered. And when I doubt my ability moving forward because I'm getting older and there's things happening, that it was just so inspiring. And then I see these women who are effectively running social enterprises, but they don't necessarily wave the banner of it, but they're entrepreneurs. They're amazing spectrum women entrepreneurs. And to hear their stories and to relate to it, you sort of go, yeah, that's me. And I could see when Sharon was nodding, amazing book. So that'd be my advice. Go read that book, and to allow space in between where you are and where you want to be to inspire you and not terrify you. Because
I want to make a point. I'm reading one of the questions without attacking the person. It says somebody, any chance this undermines someone who suffered a life-threatening stroke? And I'm actually taking real offense to that question as an autistic person. It says, Kate, you were socially overwhelmed and said, I'm having a stroke. Any chance this undermines someone who suffered a life-threatening stroke? In fact,
dude, I thought I was having a stroke. I literally did.
Let me just make my point.
I didn't know I was autistic. I didn't know I was overwhelmed. I actually thought I was.
Yeah, I want to make a point about language. And not about this particular one, but I want to elevate it to a pattern. Somebody like me or Kate is here, and we're being really, really vulnerable. We're telling you in its rawest form, because we're autistic, so we cannot lie to you easily. We tell you in our rawest form, and we're reliving our trauma. It's like, if you think of Hannah Gadsby, that's called trauma comedy. This is not like that. An autistic person that comes and says the truth, because it's so raw, it's very traumatic. So when you are in a conversation with an autistic person that has confirmed to you that they're autistic and then is telling you the trouble, when you come back with a question, take a moment to think, what I'm asking them, is it hurting them more? Do I need to go do some reading and then come back with another question? You can wait. Nothing's going to happen. But by waiting, you may not hurt the other person. So to me, that question there, and I may be wrong, it's taking away everything Kate shared, which was that moment in time that was so significant that she felt she was having a stroke, which can be life-threatening. So by saying, does that undermine the stroke patient? That's not here right now. No one here said a stroke. We don't know that. Like, this is about autism.
I get visual migraines from being sensory overwhelmed, and when they first started, like, we thought they were teachers. We thought they were mini strokes. The doctor had to look into it.
Do not do that. Because
anyway, I appreciate you, Kyriakis, standing up.
And I'm really like unpacking that, Kyriakis. It is a case, you know, because for someone that is that does become mute from comments that are said.
We can't come back.
We can't come back.
Like that can make you freeze.
Yep.
I won't sleep tonight because I'm gonna be thinking, how should I have said that? And a week later, I'm saying, I should have said that. And when am I going to see that person again? And that's autism.
Yeah.
That's not a characteristic, like a trait. That's part of the condition. So that awareness.
You
we
get
just
1,000 testimonials telling you how awesome you are, and that one that has a crack at you will eat you.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
definitely what it is.
And then you'll forget about running the country and you'll just lose sleep over it. I say this with love. My face is Greta Thunberg. I'm not angry. This is just an open conversation. So I really appreciate all your questions.
Yeah, thank you. So let's have a look. I'm gonna. You guys are better at this than what I am. Going through these questions, co-design is.
I have to say that we've been looking at the questions and answering them in our answers.
Yeah, I'm looking at
Aiden's doing it as well. So
I just looked at Aiden's question with regards to what mechanisms do each use to adapt to a business environment and make successes of your ideas. I guess you've kind of like said what you would like to see in business environments. Is there mechanisms you use when you go into network? I guess masking is the big one, like we mask so that we fit into what is happening. But is there other mechanisms that you use so that when you do go in to make success of your...
I've invested in offices that have a sensory room, not only for me, but for my staff as well. And I do use it.
Yeah.
Sometimes my blood sugar, even food may make me intensely sleepy and it will give me a meltdown or whatever. So I use that. My problem is that if I'm pre-meltdown, I may not be aligned with my senses and I may not know that I'm pre-meltdown. So in that case, I don't know what to do because I don't know that I'm in meltdown.
Yeah.
But if I'm in earlier stages, I will have a hot tea. I'll make sure I eat the right food. I'll go for a walk. I will go to the sensory room. I will put music. And for me, because I studied music at a very young age and for a very long time, I pick different motives to calm myself for different things, like gamma waves for this, delta wave for this, Beethoven for this. And some days no music works. And in that case, hot tea works. So everybody's different. And I know for my body, really strong pressures really work. And luckily my mom, sorry to go back there, but my mom figured that out as a child. So that's how we didn't know I was autistic, because she kept on giving massages and I would be calm. But when you leave your mom's home and you don't get massages all the times, now you need to make that time. It's like, I'm going to go get a massage so I can be like that. Acupuncture works for me. A whole bunch of things. But you got to test your body and see what is the perfect dosage of the perfect solution for the right moment. So if you want to elevate yourself to be excited enough to go out socially, or to be calm enough to present, or to just detox, or a number of other things. So it's a testing thing. It's a trial and error.
Thank you.
What was the question? I'm sorry, I'll go.
It was about adapting business environments for. But you can hold off if you want another one. I just want to. There's another one from Aiden here. I think it was from Aiden, which was about finding a good co-founder. I just want to give a shout out to Emily Humphreys, my co-founder at Wicked Lab, who's just amazing. Emily's dyslexic. I'm autistic, and yeah, we just have it's fun. That's all I can say is it's fun. So yeah, co-founder who has different strengths, amazing.
I just wanted to say, Sharon, the answer about all these little tricks, they apply both in life and in business, because I'll say it again, business is not in a bubble. Entrepreneurship is not in a bubble. You will be coming from home, you'll have a fight with your partner, and then you'll go and do a presentation. Both your partner and both the person you're presenting to have to understand that you're autistic and you've just gone through these things. They don't need to know what they are, but they need to both understand that you're going through that difficulty. We cannot think of business outside everyday life.
Definitely. And I have to, Emily's not here because she's traveling right now, but Emily took a long time to self-educate herself about autism. So that she is continually learning about autism, and so Emily's amazing. But I will move on.
Yes, Lee. Just wanted to say, yes, walking to the beach of autism. I'm really glad I saw that comment. I did what you said, Kyriakos. I was off in that comment. My brain went in there, and I was starting to feel it, and it's sort of like, oh, this person.
I noticed that you were reading the question.
Use their real name, and sort of like, why do we need to do this? Is why we struggle to get places in trying to get the neurotypical kind of in the business world or in the workplace and things like that. It's stuff like that that's just silly. It just gets to the point where it gets silly, and it's like, and I do feel vulnerable. A part of me sort of goes, this is why I don't go online anymore. I used to do this kind of stuff 10 years ago, but then I stopped because I didn't want to be the face of things. I wanted to make a change, and that's what I did. I've worked with thousands of people, with their careers, employment, onboarding, all that kind of stuff. But, my own people, I can't actually, the only way I can help my own character group of care leaders, because of how child protection and social services are just so like pit bulls, the only way I can do it is through social enterprise, where I create something that gives them something for free and connects things. And my autistic mind, the way that I see systems and my lived experience and all that, and I sort of stop and I think, and then, I know that it shouldn't be worth my energy, that kind of comment, but that's what we've just got to stop, because we won't have proper advocacy. And what I also hear across, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and you do sometimes hear a very angry neurodivergent voice, and at first I was sort of like, oh, I don't like the aggression. And then I'm starting to really understand it, because the misunderstanding and the being ignored and being, the flavour of the month, is this what it's going to be? A lot of people are standing back going, oh, what's this going to look like? There's people getting paid a lot of money to write these strategies. And then there's going to be people that go along and like how, when it comes to funding, right? So my social enterprise doesn't necessarily, my beneficiary isn't necessarily autistic people, but I'm an autistic person building a social enterprise that help, to help care leaders and to create awareness about that. Because the truth of the matter is, these kids are put in a situation where there are so many poor outcomes. And don't even get me started on how many kids that may have not even been diagnosed, or probably haven't been diagnosed with any kind of neurodivergence, and possibly are neurodivergent, but being treated like they're broken. And then, so now I'm sitting here feeling guilty that I've offended someone who's had a stroke. And it's just like...
So can I just say that I noticed when you were reading the question, it's like
I was looking for
the
positive
real
benefit,
the benefit of this discussion for me is that I am with two or other autistic entrepreneurs, and I can see how you are interacting, and I'm learning about myself. So Kate and I are the two different sides of the same coin. We have very different reactions.
Yang, baby.
So I would Kate reading, and this is what an autistic person can do for your business. This is the detail. I was still reading the question, and because I was reading the next word and she was reciting the previous word, when she got to 2 words before that part of the question, she stopped and she changed the topic. And at that point, I knew that needed to be discussed. So in the words of Ivana Trump, do not get mad, get everything.
Can I just share, Kyriakos and Kate, that when I had my diagnosis and we talked about this, these comments, and you end up getting like these, 10-second sound bites that go around and around in your head, and they call it loop thinking. And as when I was getting my diagnosis, they said to me, because, they're very negative, you know what I mean? Like, you've just got this, you can't sleep, you've got this thing going around your head. And when I was having my diagnosis, the psychologist said to me, do you get positive and really lovely loop thinking as well? And at that point, I just said, there's positive ones as well. I've never experienced positive one.
That's an affirmation video on replay.
Yeah, there's positive ones. I didn't realise there was positive ones, which was just amazing. Just looking through, there's a question about whether there will be a video of this, and without scaring Kate and Kyriakos, yes, there will be, and it will be on.
I will never watch this. I never watch recordings of myself.
There is a question
That
from Nicholas. Thank you, Nicholas, for that question. That goes back to what I was saying before about Hannah Gadsby's trauma drama. So I've been a broadcaster for many years, and I realized that only when I was super authentic and super vulnerable, and I'll get to my point in a minute, I'm taking you on a journey, I was actually learning something about myself, but it was really difficult. So I use that technique in my TikTok, which is in Greek. And there is, amongst all the fun and games, there's content that is about diversity, that is about queer people, that is about autistic people, which has that external audience, and it's to educate, and it's done in a real harsh way sometimes. But I do that from the safety of my home, and I rehearse sometimes the video, which trains me in a way to reduce that pause between that hurtful comment and the response. So I've now, if there was this gap, now there is this gap. So when the question comes, I will respond. And I've done that through TikTok. So I've done that traumatic almost exercise in a conscious way to train myself, but to also educate the people that watch it. And it's been quite successful. I honestly think that I've helped change the narrative in Greece. I know we've changed the narrative in Australia, in the Greek community, that niche of 600,000 people. We've certainly done that. I have the metrics, and I know that it's now happening in Greece. So thank you for the question. It's something that I do consciously. Everyone's gone quiet. Sorry, did I say the wrong?
No, I'm just madly going through I'm going through the questions.
Okay.
But it's just made me think of something while you were speaking. It's funny that you're talking to Nick, because I used to work with Nick as a professional year trainer with international graduates, and Nick was one of the. Well, I was a little bit established in there, and then left not long after. But I was back. Oh, geez. Anyway, stay focused, Kate. One of the things that I used to say, because I was very successful at it. I was very good at it, and I adored my students. And I'd work from the back of Dandenong at night time to, working in the city with international graduates, most marginalised groups. And I remember I would say to them, I don't speak a second foreign language. And so all the students were English second language. And I said, I don't speak a foreign language, a second language, but I speak 25 dialects of English. And they'd have a laugh at that. And I didn't realise what I was doing at the time until later on. It kind of popped into my head a little while ago. And I used to say to them, I go, how because we'd have to do communication. So professional year is preparing international graduates in accounting and IT and spaces like that. They've come from overseas, gone to uni, graduated, and they're trying to get into a professional role, and they're working towards permanent residency. So it's a process. And so professional writing, business writing, things that they weren't learning at uni, we take them over. It was usually a seven-month program. And I'd say, how when you hear something, we do communication. I'd say, when you hear something, and then you've got to translate that. You hear it in English, and you've got to translate it in your first language. Then you come up with a response in your first language. Then you've got to translate that again to then push that back out and have that answer. Or, and I go, is that how it works? And they go, yeah. And that's how I explain my autism and how I understand things, because I would have to learn. I would have to hear it, translate it, go and work out what it all meant, then convert it, and then send that information back out. Now, before anybody feels like I'm being disrespectful to international graduates or people overseas or any English as second language, I'm not. But it was one of those things. I think that's where I had a real connection with my students, because they understood that I understood, even though it was strange how I understood it, even though English was my first language. But that's now I sort of think, well, that's how I have to process things as an autistic person. That's why I need time to process questions. Like if we go into these, social enterprise workshops and bits and pieces, and they, I'll do a breakout group and here's your questions and you've got to come up with an answer. I need to think about that. I need to process that because I can't just spit out the answer straight away. And I think in learning business and learning, especially in social enterprise, that's where bringing it back to the ecosystem, where these people who are influencing or running workshops, there's a lot of self-professed trainers and things like that out there. It's one of the things they need to understand about neurodivergent people is that it's not too hard, really, as a trainer. It's not hard to have those questions. If you've got a session plan, then you have those questions in advance. So those kinds of things, so that we can process it, and it actually benefits the people who are, English is second language as well, because there's a lot of social entrepreneurs who English is their second language. It helps them as well. So it's not just us; it's actually benefiting such a larger cohort of people. But I just
so glad you got that across, Kate.
Yeah.
It was something.
Lex, I just want to say thank you so much for all your lovely comments, Lex. It's been really, I've been watching it as I go, and it's like, thanks, mate. Like I really appreciate it. I really do.
We've only got a few minutes left before we have to hand back to Roberto. So I want to give you both the opportunity to have a closing comments with regards to what only couple of minutes max with regards to anything you'd like to say, Caracas, with regards to closing off the session.
I want to say that despite a lot of box ticking and a lot of conversation in government, we still need to see meaningful change. And we need to see meaningful change in a whole of government approach. For example, in Victoria, that is considered to be a very progressive state. I don't think the Multicultural Commission has a commissioner that has lived experience in disability. There may be some departments that are doing this really well, but it's not doing in a whole of government way. There are other states that are even more behind. We need to see business as part of life. It's not just, here's a grant. I remember talking to a big department in Victoria about a disability creative grant, and it almost felt like I should have been deaf rather than autistic to be able to get funded. It's for disability or the deaf community, why are communities separated like that? If you're going to do that, have a grant for everyone, have funding for everyone. And what we need non-autistic people to champion that for us, because that's when we'll have the change. We can't just be the ones that are screaming. We've got angry faces. You've seen it already. So it's not going to get us anywhere. So your love and your positivity is appreciated, and let's just change the world together.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Kate.
Oh, it's L, all of the above. My mind goes to coming back to the social enterprise thing, and I know it's about entrepreneurialism, but social enterprise being that it's profit for purpose, and that you've basically, for anybody who doesn't really get social enterprise, you don't just have customers, you have beneficiaries and customers. But if you don't have customers and you only have beneficiaries, then you're a charity. So it's a little bit different. There's a lot to learn about it. It's not like standard business. And what I find is things where organisations are running pitch nights and things like that. I know one of our attendees online, we both experienced having to submit pitches. Same organisation, two different programs that they were running, but I found it sort of my competition in the pitch were neurotypical B Corp abled people who knew the language, knew how to put it all together. I spent so many weeks trying to make something look so beautiful and awesome that I was almost in meltdown, shutdown being I went into the non-expressional kind of monotone. I had nothing. By the time I'm trying to record this pitch, and I was like, oh, they want 3 minutes. They had 6 different points they want you to cover in 3 minutes.
You needed an interpreter. You needed your interpreter, see?
And it wasn't until this mob did the same they did this, the same university did a different, same but different. They did it for disability, people that were creating disability businesses for disability. Like, we're often as disabled people seen as the beneficiaries rather than the people to empower to build the business, you know, and be, as Sharon loves to say, you know, autistic led or autistic leadership. So rather than seeing us as the, you know, oh, you're the client or the participant or the beneficiary, but at the end of the day, you know, I saw them change because I was like, ask these questions, da 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 da, and then Noreen's going, how on earth could you give them all that info in 3 minutes? And she had to do one. I gave her the winner video. I was giving her everything I possibly could to get half a chance. But one of the things we did was ask them for feedback, because we don't know what we don't know. And you're expecting us to sort of go, oh, okay, well, we didn't get that. We were in competition with people who do that with their eyes closed. And so we kind of don't have a leg up anyway. And I guess the other thing when it comes to funding and grants, if they're going to start going, okay, well, let's put some funding towards empowering or building, you know, helping people with disabilities build social enterprise, or people with autism or neurodivergency build social enterprise, we need to be very careful that very experienced neurotypical people don't see that as a funding opportunity to grab, to float their own boat and row their own boat and go, look at me, I'm helping the little fella. It's like, that should be money for us. That should be money for our mentoring. That should be money for our websites. That should be money for participating in incubators and accelerators. That should be our, if they're going to go, here's some, you know, cash opportunities, and it's not just, you know, money in the bank to do what you want with, like, have these things, these resources available to us. So what was it?
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to close it down because I do have to pass over to Roberto. I just want to thank you both from the bottom of my heart. I feel so lucky to have you in my community, like in my world, and it's just
we heart you right back, Dr. Shazza.
Watch this space, Autistic Pride Day, June, Melbourne. I'll be there.
Look out, the boss is back. Did we do okay, boss?
Yes. How did we go, Roberto?
Right, you were amazing. I want just to echo Sharon's thanks. First of all, to Sharon, as usual, whatever you get up to, you dive in on the deep end, and it's leadership straight away. So thank you for all your leadership in this area. Thank you for, you know, helping us put this together. Amazing. Kate and Kyriakos, thank you for your incredible insights. And the comments is full of, you know, good things and good recognition of your insights, and also recognition of the fact that you have been so willing to make yourself vulnerable and open to this. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I told you before, I suspect that this is a conversation that is going to resume very soon. We can't just leave it pending like this. So certainly I would love to see more conversation happening. And now it's my time to give a little short plug to StartSpace, because here at StartSpace, we're really trying to work hard to make this one of the most inclusive start spaces in Victoria. And not only that, we're really working hard to fill this space with change makers. That is the ambition for the space. So as I said before, if you're Victorian, if you're over 18, if you have a business idea from whatever kind of walk of life you come from, and that idea is legal, come and visit us. We're open, we're free. You get co-working spaces available. You get a lot of programming and support for your business journey. We have tours every Monday at 12 that you can log in and come and check us out. So come and visit. We really want to build this community of change makers here in the heart of Melbourne. Also, a big thank you to all the audience. Super engaged. So thank you, audience. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. Let's continue this conversation. And of course, Kate has her hand up.
No, I have an idea. You could be the leading StartSpace group that has autistic mentoring and buddies available through the State Library of Victoria.
That was one of the questions, can I say, about Start Space and about being challenged in Start Space as a neurodivergent person, and could there be mentors? So there was a comment in there when we go through the comments.
Well, you're my buddy, Roberto. I know that I can call you if I come into. It takes me an hour and a half to get into the city. So
no. Listen, this is as I said. I can't answer that one quite straight away, but it's certainly a conversation to be had. It's certainly something that we want to build on. So let's continue this. Let's continue these conversations from people in the audience. This video is going to be online on YouTube as we speak. Add your comments, write us in. Richie, can you put on just the contact links again on the screen very briefly for 5 seconds? Get in touch with us. We want to hear more from you.
Huge thank you to you, Roberto, for having the leadership to put this on. Thank you.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. To the next one.